Reading from Peter Ackroyd, Shakespeare The Biography. After all this time, we came to chapter 80. My life hath in this line some interest. Shakespeare had returned to Stratford by the summer of 1607, at the very latest, in order to attend the marriage of his oldest daughter, Susannah Shakespeare, named as a recusant in the previous year, had now outwardly conformed. This may have been to facilitate the wedding itself. In any case, she was marrying a man of Puritan belief. Oh my goodness. Puritans. John Hall. So there is no great religious prejudice in the family itself. See, he's working with the royalty, and he works with the Catholics and the Puritans, apparently. On June 5th, William Shakespeare proceeded with his family to the church, where at the altar, in ritual fashion, he relinquished his daughter to her new husband. In the marriage settlement, he had promised them the 127 acres of Old Stratford he had purchased from the Combes 5 years before. There's every reason to suppose that Susannah was his favorite child. Certainly, she was singled out in his will for preferential treatment. She may, in fact, have inherited something of his spirit, and was described on her tombstone as being witty, above her sex, wise to salvation. The memorist added that something of Shakespeare was in that. So at the time, she must have been recognized as in some way resembling her father. She could also sign her own name, a skill which her sister Judith did not possess. Her spouse, John Hall, was a doctor, since in his later drama, Shakespeare himself displays the utmost respect for doctors. The union, no doubt, had his blessing. The bridegroom was only 11 years younger than Shakespeare himself, so Joanna was marrying a figure of some authority, not unlike her father. He had been born in Bedfordshire and had attended Queen's College, Cambridge, where he received a bachelor's and a master's degree. He had traveled in France for a period and had set up practice at Stratford some years before his betrothal. The newly married couple lived in a new place for a period after the wedding, but it is possible that they soon purchased a house a few hundred yards away in the area designated on the maps as Old Town. The timber-framed house of the period still survives and has become known as Hall's Croft, but the Halls returned to a new place after Shakespeare's death. Hall became a confidant of Shakespeare, traveling with him to London on occasions and proving his father-in-law's will. He kept a medical diary or casebook, which was published after his death with the somewhat exotic title of Select Observations on English Bodies. Here we find evidence that Dr. Hall tended his own family. When Johanna was suffering from torments of colic, for example, I appointed to inject a pint of sack made hot. This presently brought forth a great deal of wind and freed her from all pain, unquote. In her youth, their daughter, Elizabeth, suffered serious spasmodic pain. Her father rubbed spices on her back and massaged her head with almond oil until she was delivered from death. Hall believed in herbal cures, in other words, and treated other patients with Clairol. gunpowder of leaf gold, and other precious minerals. He used emetics and purgatives to good effect. One happy patient wrote that, quote, "In regard, I know by experience that he is most excellent in that art." Quote, it can be supposed that he also treated his father-in-law in Shakespeare's declining years, although no record of his ministrations have been recovered. It is interesting, however, that in his previous play, Shakespeare had used the language and terminology of what might be called folk medicine, with allusions to wormwood, ratsbane, syrup, balsam, but from the time of his friendship with his son-in-law, he introduced a more exotic range of medicines, such as Hebenum, Colaquintita, Mallow, Mandragora, and all's well that ends well. He writes of the fistula and alludes to Galen and Paracelsus in Pericles the Doctor. Cerimon revives Thasia with, quote, "the blessed infusions that dwell in vergatues and metal stones." It is hard to escape the conclusion that his interest in such matters was quickened by his son-in-law's successful remedies. When in Troilus and Cressida, there recites a list of melodies, including cold pulses and sciatica. He might have been reading from Dr. Hall's case book. There is also proof in this case book that Hall was by no means an extreme Puritan. He successfully treated a Catholic priest and noted that, beyond all expectations, the Catholic was cured, quote, adding in Latin, quote, "Deo gratias," quote. He may imagine him to have been a moderate Puritan, married to a recusant, therefore content to overlook religious differences. There were other births and deaths in the immediate Shakespeare family. The Register of St. Leonard's, Shoreditch, records the birth on July 12, 1607, of Edward Shakespeare. The son of Edward Shakespeare was baptized the same day. The fact that he was baptized on the same day as his birth suggests that there was some urgency about the matter, and indeed, a month later, the baby died. On August 12, he was buried in the St. Giles Cripplegate, where the register duly notes, "Edward, son of Edward Shakespeare, player born, the infant was the son of Shakespeare's younger brother." The name Edward in the church registers is transcription error for Edmund, and is common enough confusion in documents of the period. The mistake was prompted by the unfortunate child's own name. So we can deduct that Edmund Shakespeare had traveled to London and had taken up the profession of player, imitating the career of his famous brother. Whether he had taken up the profession on his brother's advice, or whether he had simply followed his example, is not known. The fact that his son was baptized in Shoreditch and buried in Cripplegate must mean that Edmund was living in the northern suburbs and that he was probably playing at the Curtain Theatre. He was living very close to Shakespeare's lodgings in Silver Street. In fact, it is even possible that he had shared them with him. There's no official record of his marriage, so he had also sired a bastard son. This was a not uncommon phenomenon in early 17th century London, but it does suggest that Edmund Shakespeare, now in his mid-20s, was living somewhat irregular existence as a player. There are other domestic events in record to record on October 14, 1607, in the parish church of Stratford. The son of Richard Tyler was baptized as William. It was possible that William Shakespeare was his godfather. Tyler was 2 years younger than Shakespeare, was a friend and a neighbor of the dramatist. He was also, no doubt, at school with him. He was bequeathed a ring in the first draft of Shakespeare's will. Richard Tyler was a prosperous young gentleman living in Sheep Street who had held civic office and been elected as churchwarden. In our official document, he's described as a man of honest conversation and quiet, peaceable carriage amongst his neighbors towards all people. Very little else is known about Tyler, but he may stand as representative of Shakespeare's Stratford acquaintances. They were generally prosperous, some of them being tradesmen, some of them being, like Tyler, gentlemen. They were honest and quiet and peaceable, very much the model of the English townsmen of this period. And Shakespeare remained on affectionate terms with them all of his life. It is hard not to suspect that they were comfortable and welcome company after the vivid and more excitable ambiance of London. Shakespeare could relax with them, converse with them, drink with them without the constant press of theatrical business. 4 days after the baptism of little William Tyler in the parish church, Shakespeare's nephew, Richard Hathaway Baker, was married at the same altar. If the laws of family life applied to the Shakespeares, then the dramatist would have been present for that occasion also. We're reading about the family life of Shakespeare, and his daughter got married, and his brother had a kid, and what's so exciting about? He had a witty and wise daughter named Susannah. My life hath in this line some interest. Chapter 80.